Hello everyone, and welcome back to MUP Halo. Now, the only show that actually talks about Halo. So, unlike the TV series, we will be talking all about Halo for this entire show. And we will be talking specifically about Halo Flashpoint, as everyone that listened to the previous episode is well aware of. With me is my co-host, James005. How are you, James?
I'm good, thank you. Good morning, dear listener.
Do you get that reference, though, James? I just want to make sure you got that.
No, I missed that entirely.
No, so James005 is a Spartan 2 who died.
Oh.
So
excellent.
I just want to write that because they're only on brand. Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, this week we're going to be talking about an event that James went to at Mantic Studios. Is it Mantic Studios they call themselves? I can't remember what. Mantic HQ, eh?
Yeah, Mantic HQ. Mantic have a little sort of gaming space in the front of their studios, and they were holding an intro event. Or a sort of, they called it a learning tournament this weekend past. So we, a bunch of us got in the car and went down to Mantic HQ for the first time, which was certainly an excellent experience.
Is that your first time being there?
Yeah, certainly my first time. Certainly my first time at Mantic HQ.
Interesting. All right, so we'll go into that a little bit later. So first thing, as we're going to do with every Halo MUP episode, is that we're actually going to do a bit of a spotlight on a weapon in the game or something in the game, just to kind of, so we can just add some flavour to it. So the first weapon we're actually going to talk about is the Needler, which I got into a fight on Reddit about, believe it or not, because Reddit is always a great place to have any conversation is on Reddit about that. And it's all about the wording of the actual description, because someone argued that the wording was incorrect from a lore point of view. So we're going to read it out. We're going to have a quick talk about the Needler, of how it kind of works in game, and then we'll take it from there. So the Needler is a Covenant range weapon. It uses a crystallized substance found on the Sangheli moon of Suban. I didn't actually know that bit of lore, and I don't know if that actually is well known of where the actual crystals are actually found in the lore. So I found that really interesting. Which is broken to shards to form the ammunition for the weapon, which are then catalyzed by magnetic auger. AUGER. What's auger? I think that's Olga.
Who knows?
Is that Olga? Yeah, I don't know.
Magnetic magic space stuff. Go. I would go with Olga as the pronunciation. But anyway.
All right, Olga. There you go. The weapon uses automatic fire to compensate for poor accuracy, and once the target is penetrated, the crystal shards explode to cause gruesome damage. Now, the fight that I got on Reddit is that last sentence. The weapon uses automatic fire to compensate for poor accuracy. Apparently, that's not correct, which it seems correct to me, like, if you read it. But anyway,
yeah,
it was Reddit.
Yeah, it was Reddit. I mean, having fired them a lot in the game, I mean, one of the other reasons we chose this, other than the fight on Reddit, as our kind of weapon for this episode, is it is one of the iconic weapons of Halo. And in the game since the very first, probably very first level of Halo. I mean, I would say it's an interesting weapon in terms of kind of accuracy. It's very accurate up close because of the needles track to the target. And anyone who's played the game can envisage that cloud of pink needles hurtling towards you at a slightly slower speed than a normal projectile, but homing in, and then the kind of the crystallizing noise as they you finally hit with enough needles to explode. It is one of the more iconic weapons. Whether that counts as poor accuracy, given it tracks, or whether that's the tracking is part of the low speed is part of the low accuracy, I don't know. Certainly, I think a needle that fired slowly would not be terribly effective.
Yeah, and it's worth noting also, in canon, it killed James. So it's a very poignant one to use as the first one. I looked it up. I was like, James005. What happened there? And apparently got Needler shards stuck in his jetpack and then jettisoned into space, and no one ever saw him again. So there you go, James.
Canonically, could be out there somewhere floating around.
You could be. I mean, that's the fun thing, and we'll go into that when we talk about lore, a little deep dive later on about why that's a little bit significant that James could actually be alive, but just no one's ever seen him since it happened. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, it's quite interesting to also, and I mean, if we go into Halo 2, you could dual wield needlers, right? Now, that's something that we're not seeing in-game yet, is dual wielding. So it's a question of, do you think we'll ever see that on the table?
I mean, we sort of have a little bit of that with the... we sort of have a little bit of that with the sort of the Deadeye and the rapid transition. So, I don't know. It might be... It could be a thing we see at some stage. I suppose... I suppose they've not really keyworded it in anywhere obvious at the moment. No. And it's one of these things where... It was only really in Halo 2 that you could dual wield, so it might be one of these things that sort of maybe they did a little bit of it in 3. I don't recall. It may be one of these things that sort of they did. It may be one of these things, but it was gone by 4, I think. So or Reach. So it may be one of these things that just don't feel the need.
Yeah, it was a big deal, especially in multiplayer. So it's quite interesting to not see it here and it being such a big part of the multiplayer experience, depending on the generation, obviously, in game. And we could see it from a model point of view, from a gameplay point of view. I'm not quite sure how to implement it, but it is something that's worth noting that we might see one day.
Yeah, you might see one day. It'd be an interesting thing to see. But in terms of the needler we have today, so the needler we have today is an interesting weapon, and I've seen a lot of sort of debate about it, so I thought I'd chip in. So it's a reasonably short-range weapon. It's got lethal 1, it's got rapid fire, it's got weight of fire. So it has that sort of, a lot of those kind of burst keywords, but it has nothing, it's no AP, it's no ESD, it's no way through your kind of armor or shields. So it's one of those weapons that needs a bit of help to do damage. The reason I wanted to talk about it is I think it's actually an incredibly useful weapon, and I think this comes down to something a few players probably are missing, particularly if they're playing a lot of Slayer and not trying the objective missions as much, which will come up when we start to talk about the tournament day. Generally in this game, you seem to be firing a weapon with kind of one of 3 results in mind. You're either sort of looking for you're either looking to sort of kind of whittle away at someone's defenses, drop their shields, maybe get a wound on them. Sometimes you're expecting a kill, or you're really looking for a kill from a weapon. And sometimes you're firing for an effect. And that could be rapid fire, it could be displacement, it could be pinning. And those sort of, different weapons could do all of those things. Some of them could do some of them better than others. One of the things the needler does really well is pin. It is the extra dice you get when you're sort of blazing away, I think is the term they use in the game, which
blazing
enables
away,
you to blazing away, which enables you to pin and take a shield from a target if you hit them, but not do any more damage, is incredibly useful to a character like a brawler, because it allows you to pin them, locking their snapfire or their evade off on the target, and then charge in with an extra dice. And if you've knocked a shield off a guy, off a Spartan, and then charge in, your combat knife goes straight through their armor. And there's not a lot they can do, particularly with the bonus dice. So in that regard, the needler is quite an effective weapon, but I think people should be looking for this from their weapons. Is when am I looking for a weapon that will sort of do damage? When am I looking for a weapon that will do an effect? So the needler also, if you snap fire a charging enemy, you can pin them so that they don't get to attack you. There's a lot of value in that needler, particularly in with the brawler. It should also be mentioned that pinning an opponent makes them drop the oddball, which is a key function of a match of oddball. So there's plenty of useful kind of effects from a weapon that doesn't overtly output a lot of damage, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about sort of this iconic weapon just in this short segment today.
I think the range is the only thing probably let it down, especially when you look at pinning. They have to get pretty close to do that, and I think that's just one of the... Probably, if you're going to look at both sides of the equation, that's probably the detractor on that. It's just you have to get pretty close for it, because it's a range 3 compared to like a carbine, which is a 4.
Oh yeah, it's certainly on the shorter range. I think the only thing shorter that aren't melee weapons are the shotgun. But I think the key thing with a brawler is you're already looking to close the distance and killing combat. So
true.
I think the way to watch for the Needler particularly is. It is weaker in Slayer because it doesn't directly output damage, and Slayer games tend to happen over a longer range, particularly on Spartan, whereas Spartan on Elite, those games close a lot quicker. So I think, and also in games like Oddball, like Flag, like Strongholds, you're going to need to be right on top of the enemy anyway, because you're going to need to be getting, you're fighting over the objectives. So the range, I think, becomes less of a component. What does become really relevant is trying to get either high ground or a clear shot if you want to do damage with the Needler, because you need those extra dice.
Yeah, definitely. And did you end up? I mean, we'll go into it a bit later. Did you use the brawler on the tournament day?
Yeah, I did. I brought the brawler Needler. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about my list later, and we're not going to do list building here, but
you could make hours and hours of list building, to be honest.
But I did bring the brawler with the Needler, partly because he was painted, but he did a sterling work. He did a sterling job for me all week and all day long. So I've no complaints about the Needler or the brawler.
Well, it's weirdly that's the criteria. Is like you don't want to kind of use your ideal team just because one of them is not painted. I find myself not wanting to use them, not quite yet, until I finish them all. But yeah, I totally get that. So yeah, I think a Needler is quite interesting, and that will be the first one. So if anyone out there has got a suggestion of one particular weapon, or they've got their own experience of one particular weapon that they want to share, just pop on the Discord and give us a chat, because we're just going to be talking about different weapon every time, and obviously we're going to get new weapons with Wave 2 coming through. I can't remember the top. I think a Cinder Shot. Is it? No, we're not getting a Cinder Shot. We're getting some new weapons with the expansion pack. I can't remember the top of my head which ones they are. Yeah,
there's another kind of shotgun. There's a couple of other. There's a gravity hammer. We're getting a few new weapons as we go, and we'll probably focus to those as they're released. I do like to talk about things I've had some table time with, and the Needler is certainly one of them.
Yeah, so it's going to be good. Once we cover all those, we can start to compare the new weapons coming across and how they change the meta, really, because the meta will change with every wave. We're just going to have a new reassessment of that meta, and that's what's sometimes the most nerdiest thing about this hobby is just getting to the nitty gritty of those little releases and how one stat can really change the whole gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. So next up, we're going to deep dive into lore. So with Halo Flashpoint, we're getting people from everywhere. People that are familiar with Halo and some people that aren't. So one of the little things we'll go through is actually talking about some of the deep lore that we could actually see on the table. So this time I decided, just as a bit of a starter point, is to actually talk about the Spartans. A lot of people know that get the phrase Spartan 2s a lot, but a lot of people say, well, what's a Spartan 1? How many Spartan kind of groups are there? So we're just going to really go through that. From your experience, James, what do you know about kind of Spartans as a whole? Where does your knowledge kind of stop?
Almost nothing. So I know broadly. I know super soldiers trained from a young age. I know sort of power armor, and that is really it. I've been a gamer first rather than kind of very into the lore. So other than as a target to shoot at, I'm sort of a blank canvas when it comes to this stuff. But it is interesting, and I wasn't really aware until I was playing this game the differences of the generations that we were on, sort of Spartan 7s versus Spartan 2s or Spartan 4s. So I'm very interested to hear a bit about that.
All right, so we'll go for it. So first off, there's no Spartan 7s. It stops at 4. So you're going to have the Spartan 1s, which aren't actually called Spartan 1s. That's actually called the Orion Project. That was the very first batch, you could say, of Spartans. And then you got the Spartan 2s, and then the Spartan 3s. And at the moment, what we're seeing on the cover and on the current timeline is the Spartan 4s. So everything, there's no other Spartans above that at the moment anyway. Spartan 4s are probably the more contentious of all the Spartans, you could say, because it kind of moves, kind of takes away some of the kind of what makes Spartans special a little bit, and that's why, and from a lore community, there was a bit of tension there. But a lot of people confuse the armor numbers and the Spartans together. Like they often see Mark 6 armor or Mark 7 armor, which is probably what you're referring to there. So that's just the version of the armor rather than what the Spartan numbers are. So it can get a bit messy. Just one of those things.
No, absolutely.
Cool.
So
go ahead, sorry, James.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so the difference is in that, so you've got the kind of the Orion project for your first ones, you've got the Spartan 2s, and then the Spartan 4s, did you say where we're up to? And what is the kind of primary difference between the three, just quickly?
All right, so we'll go through each one of them. So now I'm going to put some years in here, and for anyone that kind of wants to play along, you could say I'm referring to page 3 of the Flashpoint rulebook, that little timeline section there. So if you look at that and listen to what I'm saying here, kind of you'll be able to match things up. So we're going to be talking about the insurrection. So that happened in 2490. That's when it started. Now the next year, that was the start of the Orion project, or you could say the second version of the Orion project. And that's basically they were doing bioengineering and augmentation of adult humans getting just plugged in with serums and all these different experiments to basically make them super soldiers. It's the project to try and make them super soldiers to fight back the insurrectionists that had been rising within the human colonists as well. So this is before the Covenant War. The Covenant haven't even arrived yet. And the most famous person that's involved there is Sergeant Johnson, which everyone knows from the games. So he's actually a Spartan 1, believe it or not. A lot of people don't realize that's why he survived. I don't know if do you remember playing Halo and you see Sergeant Johnson get attacked by the flood and it looks like he dies, but he actually survives because he's in the next game, and that's why. It's because he actually was argumentated, whatever. He was biologically kind of changed that the flood actually resisted, so he couldn't get infected. So that's how he actually survived.
Oh.
So a lot of people don't realize he's a Spartan 1. He's actually the precursor to John or all the other Spartans. So that was what people referred to as Spartan 1s, but that was really called the Orion project. So that was before the Covenant happened. So a few years later, when that project kind of had a pros and cons, it was kind of like a mixed bag of results, and then eventually just kind of faded away because it wasn't exactly, achieving what they needed to do, which was get rid of the insurrectionist. They started the Spartan 2 project. So that was in 2517. So that was around about 27 years later from when... 26 years later. And this is before the Covenant. The Covenant haven't even arrived yet. Dr. Halsey basically identified 150 children that she believes could be candidates to become these super soldiers. And out of the 150, they kidnapped, and I mean kidnapped, actually, went out there and stole these kids, 75 of them, and then replaced them with Flash clones. So they just replaced them with kids that some of the kids died shortly after they were Flash clones because they were defective or something like that. Some of them lived a bit longer, but all of them were basically going to die within a certain period of time. But the parents would be none the wiser. So basically, Halsey went out there, identified. She actually did this with Captain Keyes as well. So Captain Keyes was involved here. Went out, stole these kids, and basically made them into the Spartans that we know today. So out of the 75 that were experimented on, 30 of them would die when they went through the augmentation process. 12 of them were left disabled as well out of that 75. So out of the 33 that survived from that 75, 2 of them will actually kill themselves after discovering their Flash clones. So they would actually meet the clones of themselves and kind of have a bit of a freak out. So of the 31 that survived from that point, only 16 are actually known to actually survive after the Covenant War, which and actually 5 of them have actually died since the Covenant War ended. So we only have about 11 of them left in modern canon. So if we are going to see modern stories being played on the table from Mantic, maybe in future expansion packs, there's only about 11 of them that would technically be alive in terms of a canon kind of side of things. And so that's what the Spartan 2 project. So what happened during that project is, they were initially created to fight against the insurrectionists, but then the Covenant War happened. So if you look at the timeline, that happened in 2525. So it happened around about, 7 years after the program started, after these kids were kidnapped at like the age of 5. So they were around about 12. So from 12 until about 20, that's when they started fighting the Covenant. And that's when, the Covenant started, and that how the Spartan 2s became this elite unit. And because they were basically bred for one thing, which is fighting, that's why they're a lot bigger than all the other Spartans. That's why they're I think they're like 7 feet. In terms of the actual cannon height, compared to like a human that's like 6 foot, or other Spartans that are like 6.5 feet. A good example is the Noble team from Halo Reach, George. So George in that team is a Spartan 2, but everyone else is a Spartan 3, which is from the other generation. So that's why the size is different. How he's massive and he's big is because he's actually just genetically bigger than everybody else. That's the Spartan 2s. Now, the Spartan 3s are basically come from that project. So after the Covenant War happened, they needed a lot more Spartans because obviously humanity wasn't doing too well. They're getting their ass kicked. So in 2032, which is around about 7 years after the war started, that's when the Spartan 3 project happened. So instead of kids being kidnapped, little kids kidnapped, what they did is they took about 500 orphans that were orphans because of the Covenant, glassing planets and everything. They took them out and actually trained them out to actually be Spartan 3s. So there was only about 3 big batches of Spartan 3s. So you got the Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, and you can tell by the letter in their name. So a lot of the Noble team from Halo Reach, there was an A in front of it, or a B in front of their number. That would have, and that would indicate from what group they were from. It's referred that the Gamma team, so the ones with the G in front of it, was the best one, the best team. But I mean, most of Alpha and Beta have all kind of died since, because they basically were used as a bit of cannon fodder. They were thrown into the battlefield, and they all basically died, with a few exceptions surviving. From a canon point of view, there's about 2 that we know that are still alive out of the 300 that eventually were conscripted, because they got 500 kids. Out of that 500, only 300 moved on to actually become Spartan 3s, and the rest of them were actually used as instructors for the next group. So those instructors were like bitter and like angry because they weren't selected. So it's kind of like just cool, like trying to make the best ones, and that kind of was a chain reaction. Moving on. So there are some Beta and Gamma Spartan 3s out there, but the majority of Spartan 3s have gone. So there is an argument to have to actually say there's more Spartan 2s alive at the moment than Spartan 3s. But that was what Spartan 3s were. So they weren't as great as Spartan 2s. They weren't bred or manufactured for one purpose. They were just basically orphan kids that they just had, and they didn't have parents anymore, and they just molded them into the best soldier they could without being selectively chosen like they were with the Spartan 2 project. So that's why they're a little bit different. And yeah, that's the Spartan 3s. Now, the Spartan 4s come after the Covenant War. So that was in 2053, with the Covenant War ending in 2552. So it was about a year later. The Spartan 4s were created. And so the difference between the Spartan 4s is they were very much like the Orion project. They were just adults that were just augmented, the best of the best, and they basically just think of the Spartan 4 as what the Orion project was right at the beginning, of adults just trying to make into super soldiers, a little bit more amped up, got that additional armor, and some notable members of it is Buck from Halo ODST. He ended up being a Spartan 4, and also Sarah Palmer, who was in Halo 4, and I think she was in Halo 5 briefly. And they basically just think of them as the best of the best chosen. It's kind of like how ODSTs were. The Hell Jumpers, they were known as the best of the best, like Marines, and that's how they became ODSTs. This, you could see, is the next step up. But people from a community point of view, I remember when Halo 4 came out and they kind of were talking about it, a lot of people didn't like it because it kind of ruined the mystique of what a Spartan was. Because you like the idea of these Spartans were bred and that there's not a lot of them. And then the introduction of the Spartan 4s, all of a sudden there's like thousands of them and they're everywhere. So the Spartan 4s are what we see on the box of Halo Flashpoint. So those are the Spartan 4s. Now hopefully that ramble makes sense.
It does, and I suspect the need for there to be a lot more Spartans is the number of Spartans we expect to have running around the universe. It's very your challenge when you want something to be unique, but also we need a lot of these things for games and for multiplayer. So no, that makes a lot of sense, and that does help distinguish between because people talk about the Spartan 2s, the Spartan 4s. That does make a lot of sense now. So thank you for that. That's a cracking introduction.
No, that's right. I've tried to put it in my head so it makes sense because, like, if I can explain it to somebody, it means I understand it well as well. And I think the good thing, and this is another reason why I want to bring this up, is actually the size of the model. Because if you've got Master Chief and you put him next to one of the other models, you clearly can see a height difference. And that's because the Spartan 4 is a normal human size because they're not augmented to actually be taller. But the Spartan 2s and, in a small case, the Spartan 3s should technically be bigger. And you actually see that on the table as well. You see Master Chief being visibly bigger in terms of size and bulk than the other Spartans. And that works with canon. And a lot of people were like, why are they... I remember when it first got released, it's like, why are they so different? It's like, that actually works perfectly. So if they are going to go like, hey, we're going to release a blue team we're going to do a strike team of blue teams. So we're going to have Master Chief, we're going to have Fred, we're going to have Linda, we're going to have Fred, Linda, and Kelly in that, and they're going to be the same size as Master Chief. That's a good way of distinguishing that model against everything else. So that's what I'm a little bit excited for, of them like looking at the lore. How can we, especially Noble Team is another one. I know someone on Reddit did a really good post the other day of Noble Team. They actually made the custom cards of all of the Noble Team, and they look really cool. And I can potentially see future waves of being infamous teams in lore, which is like Noble Team or Blue Team, which is Master Chief's team, or even other teams like Gold Team or Black Team that we know of Spartan 2. So I think it's going to open a lot of doors if they go down that route. So I think it's key to knowing why they're different, how they play on the table. I know we're going to have to look at a more balanced approach, and you would think Spartan 2 should kick all the Spartan 4's asses pretty easily, and you can see that with the Master Chief card of him being pretty... Some people argue OP, but this is all part of the fun of kind of discovering the game and balancing the game as we go. I think that's sometimes the trickiest bit when you introduce infamous characters, and I think Shatterpoint had a similar issue. Is like when you introduce a very iconic character, there is a bit of a struggle to make him not to make him too powerful, if that makes sense.
There's always that balance, and as we explore Halo and we get to grips with Chief, I think it'd be interesting to see where that balance is found. So very much looking forward to that.
Cool. So that's my spiel for the day. And I think now it's James's time to have a bit of a spiel about the event at Mantic HQ.
This is Ronnie Renton, and you are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
Yeah, thank you. So, cracking day out for everyone is probably the overall summary. So, Mantic holding an HQ learning event there, or tournament, their sort of the store they have at their headquarters. 16 of us made the trip to Mantic HQ. I had 3 in my car, and a whole bunch of locals attended. We had about 16 players on the day. Which I thought was pretty good, considering the game had been out about 2.5 weeks at that point, and it's 2 weekends to Christmas. I thought most of us did pretty well securing passes from our partners to be there. So walking into Mantic HQ, I'm conscious many listeners probably won't have been. It was really nice. It had quite a nice sort of almost cozy kind of friendly local gaming store vibe, but tons of just gorgeously painted models from all of Mantic's ranges, in display cases, as well as more Mantic product than I've ever seen in one place before. It makes sense,
you know.
It does make sense. And one of the highlights was wandering around to one of the cases where the Wave 2 releases are just sat in a nice glass display case, all painted up. So there are some photos of those I've shared on the Discord. But it was great to see those in the flesh. They do. They really look good. So very much looking forward to those. And some lovely boards, some of which seem to have been built purpose for Halo out of Mantic's own sort of terrain crate stuff. Some of which were, I think, probably repurposed Dead Zone boards. But some really nice boards to use across the day. So into the gaming, I mean, I took, it was, the event was really well run by Tobias, who was just recovering from being ill, so which left Connor to do a lot of the work, and he did a marvellous job of sort of running the store, running the tournament, and playing Ringer for the event, which something I've done in a previous life is he's always challenging, and he did that really well. I'm not going to do a lot of kind of tactics and play, because I think for most people at the event, a lot of people had played sort of a handful of games at most before turning up. I mean, I think sort of having turned up already, having played each of the missions we were going to play that day at least once, I probably came in as one of the more prepared people. And that was the point, right? It was a learning event, so I'm not going to kind of do blow by blow on the games. I'll just pick out the bits I think that are sort of relevant. So we played the four. What I'm starting to think of is kind of the four core missions, which are Slayer, Oddball, Flag, and Strongholds. I think Stockpile feels like a little bit of an odd one out at the moment, and it's the one I haven't played. But certainly, I don't think it's the one that's going to see the most organised play for a bit. So I'm sort of leaving it alone for a while. We opened up on Slayer. Slayer is Slayer, and most people will be familiar with that. And I think for anybody new, what I would suggest is, play your first game or two of Slayer, but then quickly move on to play the other games, because I think the other games provide a lot more sort of balance than experience. So we played a game of Slayer that went really well. Very interesting, sort of the tit for tat of that. I had to play into Elites for the third time ever, which was interesting. I think there's a lot of Elites do play very different to Spartans. So my Spartans taking on Elites on a gorgeous map based around, I understand it's a map called Bazaar in Infinite, which I don't play. So we played on a gorgeous map with lots of high ground, lots of cover, had a great little game of Slayer, and then moved on to Oddball. Now, Oddball's the scenario I've got the most kind of concern about as a game type. It's the one I've played the most outside of this event, and there is sort of quite a structural advantage to being able to get to the ball first and go first. So, fortunately, I was playing against Connor, who was running and TOing the event and playing Ringer, and I was fortunate enough to receive the initiative. And my Spartan that went to grab the Oddball picked up the active camo on the way. So then I had a Spartan that was able to sprint onto the point, grab the ball, then use a move dice to move back a point, and was now functionally invisible from the enemy, which was a bit of a pain.
That's just cheap, James. That just seems like yeah.
And poor Connor was sat there looking with his two dead eyes, looking at his 3 shoot dice he'd rolled on orders, with not a lot to do with them. So that game was fairly
if memory serves me right, you can carry over one of the command dice, right? If you don't use it.
You can, but you've got to be able to see someone to shoot them. So functionally, it created quite a one-sided game. And in some regards, I'm glad that happened to Connor, who was TOing and was a Mantic employee, rather than to one of the other the other newer players. And it was so we didn't know the active camo was there when I ran over it, but I wasn't going to not use it when I'd picked it up. So I do wonder if the active camo maybe shouldn't work when you're holding an objective. Does feel like a tad like, particularly an Oddball, where all you need to do then is run. And in fairness, Connor, made a good fist of clawing his way back in. He found a frag weapon that or an explosive weapon that you could then target a cube, so the invisibility wasn't as big an issue. But ultimately, the structural advantage I got from sort of a turn and a half of being able to run away with the ball, unable to be shot at, just carried me through that game. So maybe one they want to think about in terms of active camo and objectives, albeit fairly unique circumstance, that one.
Yeah, I think actually in Halo the multiplayer, you if you're invisible, then pick up the oddball. It makes you
visible
again. So I think the game, they should have taken a little note from the game on that one because I think they had the same problem.
Yeah, I think I can see that being something that gets errated gently at some stage. I think there's a few things where it's like I say, oddball for me is the scenario I have the most concern about, just because like getting the oddball is going first, getting the oddball, and then it does feel like quite a structural advantage if even if you can pin someone, make them drop it. It scatters randomly. There's a decent chance it scatters closer to the enemy. Being certainly on round one, being able to sort of force them to drop the odd ball, then get it back yourself, and then it does feel a little bit. It certainly initially it does feel a little bit one-sided, that game, but follows a true.
Once you get, I was going to say once you get that advantage, it's quite hard for the other side to claw that back. Because, I mean, I can see that being real difficult to turn the tide, you could say, on that particular match.
Yeah. But, he took it really well. Obviously he was there representing Mantic and running the day. So if anyone was going to have that experience, I was glad it was him and not somebody playing Halo for sort of the second or third time. So, we moved on through Oddball, into game of Capture the Flag. I think a lot of people, this was their first kind of Capture the Flag. There's nobody managed to score 3 flags during the day. Flag is, I think with a turn time limit and a round time limit. I got to 2 flags. A number of other people got to 2 flags. Nobody quite got to 3 through the day. Flag's really interesting. I really like Flag as a mission because you've got to balance your resources between defending your flag and attacking their flag. My opponent had some dreadful dice throughout, and probably there were times where, having never played Flag before, maybe they prioritised defense rather than offense, maybe more than I would have done. Really their dice did not help. I had a Spartan with a gravity hammer in melee with 2 elites, and this guy did not die. This guy spent 3 rounds being pummeled by 2 elites in the same cube and just laughing. This Spartan, I don't think he took more than 1 wound across the 3 rounds of sort of combat, which is just rather unfortunate for my opponent. But certainly the sort of, it feels like for Flag, getting early positioning, getting to a point where you've got some control of the mid-ground so you can kind of break and get the flag seems really important. But what's interesting when we will come later to talk about the UKGE pack, I think Flag is something that they're already kind of focusing on for some light changes, so to speed the game up. So we'll talk about that in a later section. And then finally on to Strongholds, and Strongholds is your classic stand-on stuff mission, and had a great time with sort of standing on and holding objectives. The layout of those objectives mean you need to be really paying attention with Strongholds as to where you're starting, because you need to be able to get people to Strongholds and get them there reasonably quick. My opponent sadly just made a little deployment error and couldn't get onto one of the high value objectives early, which just gave me a structural advantage then, which is sort of in a reasonable tit for tat with the elites that he was running. Just gave me the advantage into that game. There was a really nice thing on the day where they were running spot prizes. So you could spot prize for the person each round that sort of got the most successes in a roll. So once you've exploded all your headshots, how many successes do you have on a roll? What's the highest number? And the person who got the highest number each round got to choose one of what I understand are incredibly limited foil character cards. So from the original, there's a lovely kind of foil art version of each of the kind of the fire team from the Recon edition. So each of those Spartans, they're apparently they're samples for something that's coming later. So I hear, and I fortunately in the first round I did. my Deadeye got to stand on something and shoot an elite in the open, and got me about 13 successes to score me a very nice foil Deadeye card. So that's probably I got one, and that's probably cemented that Deadeye in my roster forevermore. Because it's a particularly gorgeous little card.
You have to send a photo. You hid this from us. You didn't say anything about this. I'd love to see that.
Oh yeah, I'll certainly send you a photo of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So they're saying it's a prototype for something else coming. I wonder what that's trying. It could be tied into the tournament play, but maybe because I do know that it could be related to some of the tournament packs they're thinking about sending out and so forth. So.
I got the impression it wasn't something imminent. I think Cleric has sort of since dropped a hint that this is something maybe for next year that they're going to think to do as part of the organised play kits. But certainly that was a very nice little thing to get. Through there. I mean, throughout the day, everybody was exchanging war stories. There was a lot of people talking about kind of favourite moments from playing Halo as a computer game. There were lots of people. Lots of sort of war stories exchanged. Everybody seemed to have a good time. Most people were on sort of a handful of games, but seemed enthusiastic for what's next. So certainly, me and my tournament travel buddies had a great time. We were all signed up for the next thing that Mantic are doing, and probably our day was improved by the fact that myself and sort of my kind of regular sparring partner Paul managed to come out first and second on the day, which we're not going to make too much of, given it was a learning event. But that was a really nice it was a really nice thing. And Michael, who joined us as well, playing his second, third, fourth, and fifth games of Halo ever, managed to come out in around fifth. So. We had a really successful day, and everybody present had a great time. And Mantic, were really welcoming and put on a great show for us. It was great to see the new stuff and some stuff that hadn't been talked about yet, and get and have a good day. Get 4 games of Halo in.
Yeah, sounds. I wish I was there. I do envy you quite a lot. I mean, I would love to be able to just go to Mantic HQ. I mean, obviously, it will cost me $4,000 to go there, but. But yeah, just hearing the enthusiasm of everyone, and I mean, you're on the ground floor of some of the first tournaments, so you're going to be seeing this scene develop. And I think there is an expectation that the tournament scene is going to be there, but I think the big question is how big will the scene be? And I think it's going to be a combination of how the community welcome new players in, but also how Mantic respond to the community in terms of Wave 2 and the rules and communication, all those little things like the Mantic events as well, of just let's see how this grows and make this changes, because it is early days. It's not all roses yet. It's not a well-defined system. It's a good start. It seems like that's the consensus of everyone that's reviewed it that is new to Mantic. It seems like it's a good start, and it's just a question of what goes from here. And it sounds like they're doing the right things anyway from the ground floor. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good start, a really positive start. The game definitely has legs and tactics within it, and it's on us as a community and Mantic now to build on there and kind of go from there. And I think we'll talk in the next section a little bit about the first stages of that. Unless there's anything, I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about from the day. But did you have any questions, Dave? Was there anything I didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. Do you have any tidbits? Anything that you're allowed to talk about? Anything that you should, you want to tell? You saw Wave 2 personally. Is there anything there that doesn't come across when you just look at the pre-orders?
No, I mean, I think that stuff was gorgeous. I think in terms of I didn't get a lot of super secret squirrel information, I'm afraid. So no kind of no stuff to break there. But in terms of looking at Wave 2, it all looks really great in the flesh. Obviously, I only saw the models, so I've not seen the rules yet. So they'll be interesting when we start to get a look at those. I think the main thing was it was just a great day out, and actually playing this as a game. The game worked really well, playing into people who you hadn't played before, who you didn't you needed to kind of sit down and play with for the first time. The game was really smooth. There were relatively few few and far between kind of actual rules issues on the day, and it worked really smoothly, and I've no concerns about this as a game that's got legs from an organised play standpoint, which is ultimately what I'm primarily interested in.
What I'm curious about, any mention what's actually going to be in the expansion other than just the models and that?
No, I did try to get some further information, but no. We know we've seen the precursor
the point
to the
system.
Yeah, didn't get. I couldn't get any information out of that. I mean, there seems to be a lot of speculation on the point system at the moment. I think from what Mantic have said, you could read what they said two ways. If you watch the roadmap video, I think the phrase that was used was sort of with points for every combination of weapon and Spartan released so far, weapon and model released so far. I could read that in two ways. You could hear that as every extant combination, so brawlers with needlers, brawlers with shotguns, Deadeyes with stalker rifles, Deadeyes with DMRs, or actually points for DMRs, points for needlers, points for brawlers. So if you really wanted a brawler with a DMR, you could have one. I don't know what they've. I think some people are taking it as the latter. I'm not clear that they've actually said that, and certainly I couldn't get any more intel out of them on the day. But I'm sure in due course Mantic will clear that up, and I think whatever happens, that's going to be a really interesting. It's going to be a really interesting experience when we start to see that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that does trip up everyone is a bit of the phrasing of the expansion pack when it goes, build custom fire teams that go far beyond the base game's team. So a lot of people are like, is it custom as in you can swap out the actual just the Spartans, or can you make custom Spartans and create your own fire team? I think that's what everyone wants a little bit of clarity about, because Halo was all about customization, and mainly in the later part of the games of like using your own armor, having your different loadouts, especially with Halo 4, 5, and Infinite. It's all about different loadouts and all that. So I think that's where people are going, is that coming, or are we going to always just have these kind of like set kind of characters, you could say, and without too much customization there? I think that's where the big question is.
Yeah, and whether that's something that they're going to do now, or whether that's something that comes later when there's more options, or I've got no kind of clue. I would love it to be full customization, provided that they know enough about where the supporting walls are. I mean, a DMR in the hands of a Deadeye is fundamentally different to a Deadeye, to a DMR in the hands of a brawler. So I do think there's some interesting questions about how they would approach full customization. There's a halfway house. There's actually it's the same, it's your basic weapon combination and Spartan combination that you've got today, but then some augmentation. So potentially allowing for say you've got a situation where it's, I'm going to pull numbers out of thin air, you've got some points left over, but say, you've got 40 points, your average Spartan's 10, but some are 8, some are 12. You quite easily see a situation where you've got 2 10s and 2 8s, and you've got 4 points left over. Are there options to say start with a frag grenade? Are there options to impact the recon roll in a way that's not full customization of Spartans, but actually allows you to sort of spend your kind of spare change on something? I don't know. That might be more than they want to do at this stage. But I'll be very interested to see what that looks like as we go. Well,
we do know past Wave 2, the first faction we're going to have is the Banished, as Clive Stone accidentally... I don't know if he accidentally announced it, but on Reddit, he answering a question, he said the first faction is going to be the Banished. So we should expect that. So it'll be interesting to see if we are going to allow customization, how does that work with other factions as well? Because that's when things may get a little bit complicated, because yes, we're used to... customizing our own Spartans, but when you start customizing your own elites or brutes and other factions as well, they're going to have to really define what you can or can't customize. So I think they're going to, whatever we're going to see here is probably going to set the precedent for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what happens with renouncing points for future release stuff as well will be an interesting thing to see. One thing they did let slip on the day, they are testing Wave 3 and 4 at the moment, or Wave 4 at the moment, I can't remember, but the sort of Wave 3 and 4 I think are planned for by the end of the year, was sort of I think something they let slip a little bit. So more to come and more planned this year beyond what we've already seen, which I think we knew, but it's
this year.
That was the implication I got, and obviously the implication I got was more stuff beyond that this year, but we don't, because it'd be interesting, and obviously production delays can occur, so but certainly an indication that they're not planning to be too slow straight out the gate.
I think I know what they're referring to. So every year, what Mantic do, they do like a 12 days of Christmas thing. So what they do is every day of Christmas, they announce something. Sometimes it's a book or from Kings of War. Sometimes it's a new line, new model, something like that. I've got a feeling this is an announcement probably for Halo is going to be one of these days. So I think that may be what they're referring to, of something they're going to announce it during that 12 days of Christmas, which should start soon. If they do it, I mean, they did it last year. I'm assuming they do it this year. So that could be what they're referring to. They're going to maybe give a preview of Wave 3 or 4, which they've been hinting at doing for a while, that yes, we are going to show you the Banished and it is coming. So that could be what they're referring to. I'm just guessing, just based off what you said there. So that's exciting. That's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's I'm really, really keyed up for that, and I'm really looking forward to we got the UKGE event that's coming up less than a month now in January, where Mantic have paid or may come to some arrangement with UKGE to make I think 100 tables available for Flashpoint at the Nottingham GT, which is a big 40k tournament. My understanding is they've sold about they're doing it as 2 one-day events with up to 100 players each day. They've sold half their tickets so far, but their tickets are essentially free. So they're sort of Mantic of obviously putting a lot into pushing Halo out there and into that group. So that's that's sort of what's next on my mind, and then it'd be fascinating to see if we get these anything for Halo in these 12 days of Christmas. I'm really hoping we do, because it sounds like Mantic are infused by the game and the enthusiasm people have had for the game, and hopefully this is really going to get going.
Well, it seems like it's been received well. I think the only complaints I've seen are very nitty, kind of like little nitpicking side of it, just with people from a neutral point of view. Obviously, I haven't seen every review out there, but the ones I have seen, and I like the ones that do nitpick it a little bit, because that means that you don't want just people glorifying your game, because that's how games don't improve. That's how games kind of get real stagnant, when people don't really criticize it in a constructive way. If they just say, yeah, everything's great, don't worry about it, nothing's ever going to improve. So I've seen very good positive kind of things in the community at the moment. Cool. If you want, we could jump right into the UKTC is what they're calling it.
UKTC are this causes chaos in other game systems, because UKTC are a company that run big tournaments in the UK, and then there are various things that are called GTs that happen at UKTC, and there's also UKGE, which is an entirely separate thing. So the acronyms get incredibly confusing, but basically there's the UK
dumb it down
circuit.
For me.
Yeah, okay. Basically, there's a company called UKTC, UK Tournament Circuit. They run big 40k tournaments all through the year, all around the UK. That's who they are. So I went for Marvel Crisis Protocol they hired an entire sports arena in London. They had about 1,000 40k players in there, plus 500 or more, I would have thought, of sort of other game systems. And I was playing Marvel Crisis Protocol on the end of that at a big sports centre around in September. That's their biggest one. They have an event in Nottingham in January. So that's second weekend of January. And as
so for the record, we'll say from the 11th or Saturday the 11th of January to Saturday the 12th of January, just to be specific.
Yeah, the 11th and 12th of January. Yeah, absolutely. Tickets are £1 and that a day, and that £1 is refundable. Now, to be honest, I'm not particularly interested in getting my pound refunded, but I have paid my £2. We've booked an Airbnb. We're going down for the weekend to that event. Now, so obviously Mantic have come to some arrangement with UKG, because those tickets are normally about £50 for the weekend. So that's a lot of table space that Mantic are going to be taking from UKGE that they could fill with more 40k players at £50 a head. So Mantic have obviously put some investment into making this happen. They sold about half the tickets at the moment, but the thing that's probably interesting to our dear listeners who maybe can't make it, potentially, those of you who would have to spend thousands of dollars to fly around the world to get there, the tournament pack for it is available and is on the UKG website. We'll put the links, I think, in the show notes. So there are 2 documents in there. And I think these are useful for anyone who's interested in maybe a preview of what might be coming in terms of the organised play approach and document. So in there, there's a few things. So you can, for this event, you bring 4 models for a fixed fire team for the day. They're running as 2 one-day events. You can't have more than 2 of a single kind of currently released loadout. So you can have 2 brawlers with shotguns and 2 brawlers with needlers, but you can't have 3 brawlers with needlers. Obviously, you can't mix elites and Spartans, and Master Chief is 2 models. This is the first event Master Chief is legal in. He wasn't allowed at the learning event, which is probably as well.
Oh, really?
Play a little bit
Interesting.
different. No, I suspect that was we need you to learn how the game works without having to worry about how Master Chief works as well. So
yeah, let's not overcomplicate it. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so that's kind of a bit of a preview to probably how organised play work, at least until there's points in a few months' time, and then the games that are scheduled, are the 4 that I've already talked about. Stockpile seems to be being left on the shelf for a bit, and so there's a version of those each day. The scoring is really interesting. So scoring, and this might be a Mantic thing I'm not used to, is the first tiebreaker isn't wins and the results and placing aren't done on wins and losses. They're done on tournament points, with 5 tournament points for a win plus whatever victory points you earn in a battle, plus achievement points, and that's very new to me.
Achievements points is quite interesting. Good tying in that Xbox kind of achievements, because achievements was a big thing for Halo. Like I that was the main reason I played a Halo was trying to get all the achievements. I've even tried to con my girlfriend to just holding a controller while I try and get an achievement. So I think that's a really cool tie-in. I don't really know how smooth that's going to work though. It seems I don't know if it feels wedged in or if it's going to flow very naturally. That's a big question.
I worry about scoring systems that aren't based, that allow situations where, and there's some nuance with this that means it probably doesn't matter as much, but I do worry about score systems that can potentially allow for players with fewer, players who lose more games to finish above players that won more games. That would be pretty tricky in this system, but it is theoretically quite possible. You win a game of, you win a game of, or lose a game of Slayer 11-12, but pick up two more achievement points than your opponent. You're going to have more tournament points than the person. It's possible that you can have more tournament points than the person that won the game. Now, the 5 bonus points for winning is probably pushes that out in a lot of cases, but I think there are cases where it's certainly in games like Flag, which only play to 3 points, it's quite possible that there's sort of, you get into some awkward, you can get into some awkward kind of points things where the finishing isn't as clean. Achievements is interesting. I think knowing that those are live, like particularly for new players, like keeping track of everything you've got to keep track of, plus remembering, well, did I kill an enemy with a frag weapon? Did I kill, did I get a double kill? Some of them, like Will of the Gods, have all of your models destroyed in a game. Kill 4 enemy without suffering a loss yourself. Some of these are not immediately apparent as you're doing them. And so actually remembering to keep track of these in-game is going to be quite interesting. And it's the most tournament points wins. So these achievements are going to matter.
Now the achievements. Sorry. Go ahead, James. Sorry. Oh no, I was going to say. I'll just quickly jump in, just because we're speaking achievements now. If you want to read them yourself, we've put a link in the Discord as well. And as James said, it'll be in the show notes. But they're very familiar to some of the achievements are very familiar to if you played multiplayer, like double kill, triple kill, overkill. Little things like that. So there is a tie there that some of them seem a little bit obvious, but it's worth reading. I think there's how many are there? About 12, I think there was.
Yeah, about a dozen,
12?
I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's Slayer spree as well, like a killing spree. So all of these do kind of tie into how multiplayers get kind of used. So I would suggest anyone, if you got the time, read through the list there, because it's quite interesting to see how this is going to influence the scoring aspect of it, and it's a very unique aspect. Sorry, I just want to jump in there.
Yeah, and it does reward you for playing with a painted force as well. That's worth as far as I can tell, 1 tournament point per round. So 4 tournament points across the day turning up painted. So I do. But
what's the definition? Like, if you paint it black, does that count?
It says play with 4 fully painted miniatures. I painted is something I know it when I see it. Trying to write rules for what counts as painted, I think, is just a road to madness.
I don't know. People like to meta play. Like, oh, I just want to play this character real quick. I'm going to go back and just quickly paint it black and then bring it back to the table.
Spray it, wash it, dip it, dry brush it, paint the gun. I think you'll be fine. But make an effort, I think, will probably be the key thing.
Hey there, I'm Brian.
And I'm Rick.
From Dead Zone, the podcast.
And you're listening to Mantic Universe Podcast.
For everything Mantic under the sun.
The sort of and then the second document is the map pack. And for those of you playing at home, I think this is probably really more relevant to you. So have a look at this map pack. So this has terrain layouts for the kind of the core pieces of terrain for each of the game types that we, with the exception of stockpile. So you sort of see where the kind of the main buildings would be placed in these events. That'll be locked, and then players will alternate placing the scatter terrain. The other thing to keep in mind is there's some changes to the game in this document, which are, as I understand it, Mantic having played a bit more of this than everybody else, looking and going, what makes for a more balanced game? So some of that's the layout. There are other changes. So weapon drops, rather than being face up, are face down. So you can't see what the weapon is before you go to pick it up.
Oh, yeah.
Which is quite interesting and an interesting change. The other one, there's a major change in flag. So in Capture the Flag changes from being an item to being a weapon that prevents you from shooting when you've got it. It's a fairly
that makes sense
weapon.
Though. Yeah, that's very. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is in game, and it makes sense. Like you're supposed to be vulnerable when you pick up the flag. That's the point. But if that's just like, I mean, you pointed out, it's like getting the camo and the oddball at the same time. I mean, it gives you that extra advantage when you're supposed to be vulnerable. The whole point of holding on to it is just holding out as long as you can and getting it back to the point.
Absolutely. And so you've got that aspect of it. The other thing about being a weapon, and Cleric has confirmed this is intentional, is in the book version of Capture the Flag, you can't drop the flag voluntarily unless you manage to pick up a third item that allows you to then displace the flag off and drop it. In this version, it is a free action. The version at UKTC is a free action to drop the flag where you're stood. That is incredibly useful because it will speed the game up quite a bit because people can kind of relay the flag. It also means that when the current problem is if you're killed with the flag, it scatters, which means you can lose progress on flag. That won't happen if you drop it, but if there's an enemy in the cube you're in, you can't pick the flag up. So that decision to drop the flag or not is going to be quite interesting, I think, when we get to when we get to that. So that variant of Capture the Flag is really interesting. And then finally, Strongholds has defined placement for which value token goes where. So Strongholds, you currently randomise the victory points for each location. Some of them are easier to get to than others. In the UKTC pack, there is again a sort of a defined, this is where the objectives drop. Now, I've not played with these rules yet, and I've not played with Master Chief yet because I was waiting till I'd done this weekend, so I was not corrupting my own kind of understanding of the game before I go to the learning event. This sort of switching to this version of the rules now for a few games before we go to UKG in Nottingham will be really interesting. But I encourage you at home, if you're playing a bit of Halo, I'd certainly try giving these a go. I think they'll be quite interesting to play and potentially provide a bit more of a balanced experience. So, very much looking forward to giving these a whirl.
Yeah, I would say that the only other big difference, other than the rule changes, is the terrain as well. There are some significant terrain changes on all the maps. There's more terrain, so you might not have enough gear based off what you were given in the initial pack. But I mean, if you once you understand the concept of how they work, you probably can can supplement it with something else. But that's another thing that changes from these rules here is just the terrain. There is more, so you might need a few alternates just to fill in the blanks there.
Yeah, there's an expectation, and they're providing terrain for the event, but yeah, there's about 2 recon editions worth of terrain on the board. Expected to be on the board, which is a lot of terrain. And I think Halo's probably operated on the basis that there's an expectation you don't have clear line of sight very often. I think the game's been balanced around that. But I'm certainly interested to see how these play on these maps. And you can see some of the placement if you look at them sort of modified in oddball. The terrain is pushed very much out away, so that it's more difficult to get away and hide with the oddball. Capture the Flag and Slayer, it's more kind of contained, and then Strongholds, the terrain is placed to make to make the outer stronghold points as higher ground. And I'm just going to be really interested to see how all of this fits together as a play experience. And I'll be getting some games of that in the time between Christmas and New Year, ready to for that big event in January, and I'll be certainly come back and report A, how I found it, and B, how the weekend was.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting, especially how the terrain changes depending on the scenario that is played. Because I mean, in the book, it's all the same. It's the same kind of terrain placement. This is now we're changing things up, and it'll be interesting to see if that's going to be the norm going forward. Is that depending on the scenario, the terrain changes, or are we going to go back to a static map, similar to like we have in the Halo games? Is that you get the one map and you get a little variation in terms of where the items are placed and certain things like that, but the ultimate terrain and how everything's built stays the same. If we're going to be moving away from that and depending on the scenario, or this is just for this tournament, this is just for a bit of kind of trying it out, because I do like the idea of the same map, just different scenarios and different placement of weapons, and that all the terrain's kind of, so the look of it is still the same. But again, this is all the early days of the game, so who knows how they're going to do it going forward.
Yeah, and I do think like standardization of maps. So I have a love-hate relationship with map standardization. Like that's a very 40k thing that's crept into other games over the last few years, and I'm not a big. I would rather we can have some variation on interesting maps rather than sort of say the map must be this thing, because I think it limits. I'm someone who builds terrain. One of my mates, is a real terrain builder, and sort of it does limit what you can do practically when building sort of decent terrain. By having these really, these kind of really prescriptive kind of shapes. I suspect what will happen is at the main Mantic events, these sort of bigger kind of things where Mantic are providing the terrain, there'll be standard setup. I think once you're playing at your FLGS with your mates or a local event, it's going to be what tournament, what terrain is available. So, but I'd probably do, if you're looking at this pack from home, and I would encourage people to have a look at this document. Take the kind of the rules changes and the objective placement stuff, look, and then just take a little bit of a look at what they're sort of suggesting in terms of kind of map layout, in terms of like, when do you want the center of the board to be congested with terrain? When do you want the center of the board to be more open? As a suggestion about maybe what you'd want to think about if you were, if you got variable terrain on at a game you're playing. But I'll certainly report back when I've experienced it. Right now, I'm very much theory crafting based on the read of the document and the games I've played without using it. So I'm very much looking forward to giving this a go.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear how when you're playing against a few more seasoned players, seeing the strategies that come up. I mean, from the sounds of what you were saying earlier, a lot of your wins did come from a little bit of rookie areas, you could say, just a little kind of placement areas and little things you learn just based off experience. So it'll be interesting to see in a bigger tournament over the weeks and over the months that the game's played a little bit more. What changes, what becomes the meta, you could say, because the meta is still pretty fresh, and typically it's the players of the game that develop the meta, not the actual developers of the game a lot of the time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's always interesting that whenever you release anything, the amount of eyeballs it gets in the wild compared to the amount you're able to have in testing. You immediately within a week, within a week, you will have had more people play more games than you could ever have achieved in a test environment, right? So,
exactly.
I think we'll find out where the supporting walls are. One of the great things at the weekend is that Mantic seem really open to hearing about that. There are things about this pack that I've got a little bit concerned about. I'll talk about those though when I've experienced them rather than now. But Mantic seem really open to change and evolve, which is really fantastic. So I'm looking forward to coming back and talking to you all about that when I've got the experience to do so from a position of some experience.
Yeah, exactly. So that's on the 11th and 12th of January. So in case anyone is actually interested in going themselves, where can they actually get those tickets? You said I'm not advertising. We're not sponsored, by the way. I'm just saying this for the sake of it, if anyone is curious.
So yeah, if you type UKTC Nottingham into the into the old Google, that will take you to a page on UKTC events website. And from there you can see all the events that are running at that place. Halo Flashpoint is listed second. The map packs are on there. The tickets are on there. The tickets are £1 a day. So it really doesn't cost you anything to go and give it a go. They're 2 one-day events, so you're not committing to, for those of you in the UK, you're not committing to a full weekend. You can absolutely turn up for a day. I understand they've sold half the tickets already. I know I keep saying that, but that's sort of, they've got 200 tickets for the weekend. So they've sold across the weekend, 100 tickets. So there will be people to play. And it's certainly worth, so I'm not sponsored. We're not sponsored by them. It sounds, I'll be there to experience it for better or for worse, but it does sound like it's going to be worth having a go. And people will be really new. This is not a game that's going to have a super hardened competitive scene just yet, because, most people will have got the game for Christmas or in the last couple of weeks. A lot of people will be going having played half a dozen games at very most. So it should be a great day to go and learn. So I'm really looking forward to that.
And I won't be going because the exchange rate, that pound is actually $2.20, and I can't afford that. Yikes. That's crazy. And also by that time I'll be on the heart transplant list, so I'll be hopefully I'll be here. But if not, I'm sure we can rope somebody in to have a chat with James. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, but I'm interested to hear the conversation. And if anyone out there does get any tidbits about what's going up as well, reach out to us, and especially join in the Discord. If you're having trouble finding the link below, just go on our Discord. We'll post it there, and we're trying to have an active conversation. So if you've got any questions that you want to throw to us at the pod, you want to come on the pod and talk about it. If you just have something you want to just get off your chest about the game, feel free to join the Discord and just have a gas bag with us, because we want to talk about this a bit more. So the more voices we have, the more informed our opinions are, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. Cool. And I think with that, depending on when this comes out, happy Christmas to our listeners, and we'll see you all again soon.
Yeah,
in MUP Halo.
Hopefully we can edit this nice and quickly. We get this out within a couple of days. But yeah, it's been really great. And yeah, if you want, as I said, go join the Discord. We also got their YouTube channel as well. We're going to be releasing the Halo episodes on there as well. I actually want to shout out a bit a YouTube channel, and a guy I actually do want to try and get on the pod. So if anyone can help me with it, let me know. Forging Flashpoint. So he does a YouTube called Forging Flashpoint. He does really good terrain. He just did a recent one regarding the Rohan map, diorama. It looks really good. I think he's American. He sounds American. He's really into making custom builds of maps and so forth, and that really ties into what we're talking about. He does some paint tutorials, and he just seems like someone he doesn't have a lot of people following him, only about 500 subscribers, but you can tell just by the passion, by how much effort he's putting into these videos, and just the talent behind it. He's going to be, it's just that enthusiasm was how the community is going to stay and grow, and this whole channel that he's built is just for Halo. Halo Flashpoint to be specific. So I would say give him a check out. And if anyone knows how we can get him on the show, because I've reached out to him a couple of times, he hasn't got back to me. So I would love to have like a conversation, like what's his motivation behind getting into Halo. I mean, I don't really see too much about that. He does dive into the competitive side of it, but I can't see too much about the tournament scene on his end, whether he's been to tournaments, because an American side of it, we don't really have that insight of how that scene is coming along, because I suspect in America it is an American game, so it could kind of go up a next level over there. So, but yeah, I would say encourage anyone interested to check them out. But yeah. Have you checked them out there yet, James?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of the videos. I think fantastic, fantastic stuff. And I'm, as someone who's looking to build Halo terrain myself, once I figured out what good terrain for Halo looks like, I'm really fascinated. I build a lot of Marvel Crisis Protocol terrain for our local FLGS. So I'm really looking forward to getting into some Halo terrain before too very long.
Yeah, it's going to be great. All right, well, we'll leave it there. So, yeah, nice chatting with you, James, and nice chatting with everybody out there. If you've got any questions, just reach out to us. As I said, Discord, Facebook, all those fun stuff. We do have a Patreon now, but it's really for Mantic Universe Podcast overall, for us to just improve things and make things a bit easier on the ears, because I do know sometimes it can get a bit distorted and a bit painful. So, it is there if you want, but if not, we're going to be doing this anyway. So feel free to donate if you wish to. But yeah, until next time, I'm Dave, and James, you're not dead, so you can
not yet.
Sign off there.
But have a fantastic Christmas, everybody, and or a happy New Year, depending on when this comes out. And we will speak to you all soon. Have a great time.
Cool. See you, everyone.